This means the entrepreneur must be a very proactive learner. Once I crossed the line from employee to entrepreneur, my real education began. I was soon reading every book on business I could get my hands on, reading financial newspapers, and attending seminars. I knew I did not know all the answers. I knew I had to learn a lot and learn it fast. Today, nothing has changed. I know that my education as an entrepreneur will never have a graduation day. I will always be in school. In other words, when I was not at work, I was reading or studying, and then applying what I learned to the business. Over the years, this constant study and then application to the business has been one of my most important habits for success. As I said, I was not a natural entrepreneur, as some of my friends were. But as in the race between the turtle and the hare, the turtle slowly but surely caught up with and passed some of my friends whose cups became full when they achieved success. A true entrepreneur has no graduation day. Overspecialized. The following diagram comes from Rich Dad's Cash Flow Quadrant, Warner Books, the second book in the Rich Dad series. The E stands for employee. The S stands for self-employed, small business, or specialist. The B stands for big business owner, 500 employees or more. The I stands for investor. One of the reasons so many entrepreneurs are in the S quadrant rather than the B quadrant is that they are overly specialized. For example, medical doctors in private practice are technically entrepreneurs but may find it hard to migrate from the S quadrant to the B quadrant because their training is too specialized, their cup is full. For a person to move from S to B, he or she will need more generalized training, and must always have an empty cup. A side note on the cash flow quadrant. One of the reasons why Rich Dad recommended I become an entrepreneur in the B and I quadrants is that the tax laws are most favorable in those quadrants. The tax laws are not as favorable for employees or self-employed people, the E and S quadrants. The tax code offers greater incentives, i.e., loopholes, for people who either hire a lot of people in the B quadrant or invest in projects the government wants growth in, investments such as low-income housing. In summary, taxes are different in different quadrants. This book will go into the differences in each quadrant and how an entrepreneur can migrate from one quadrant to another, especially from the S quadrant to the B quadrant. A list of differences. Before quitting their jobs, people need to decide if they want to make the transition from employee to entrepreneur. The transition or metamorphosis requires a change to some of the following traits. 1. Ability to change philosophy from security to freedom. 2. Ability to operate without money. 3. Ability to operate without security. 4. Ability to focus on opportunity rather than resources. 5. Having different management styles to manage different people. 6. Ability to manage people and resources they do not control. 7. Team and value-oriented rather than pay or promotion-oriented. 8. Active learner, no graduation day. 9. Generalized education rather than specialized. 10. The courage to be responsible for the entire business. You may notice that farmers, possibly our earliest entrepreneurs, have had to develop most of these traits in order to survive as farmers. Most had to plant in the spring in order to harvest in the fall. Most had to pray the weather was in their favor and that pests, diseases, and insects left enough for the farmer's family to live on through a long hard winter. Rich Dad often said, if you have the mindset and toughness of a farmer, you will be a great entrepreneur. The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. While this book starts off describing the process of becoming an entrepreneur as a painful and time-consuming process, I also want to let you know that there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. As with any learning process, even learning to walk or ride a bicycle, the start of the process is always the hardest. You may recall my first official day as an entrepreneur was not a good day. If you stick with the learning process, your world will change, just as your world changed when you finally learned to walk or ride a bike. The same is true with entrepreneurship. For me, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow has been greater than my wildest dreams. The process of becoming an entrepreneur has made me far richer than I could have become as an employee. Also, I have become somewhat famous and recognized throughout the world. I doubt if I would have become famous as an employee. Most important, our products have reached people throughout the world and in some way helped them make their lives a little better. The best part of learning to be an entrepreneur is being able to serve more and more people. Being able to serve more people has been my primary reason for becoming an entrepreneur. The philosophy of an entrepreneur. Becoming an entrepreneur began with a change of philosophy. The day I left the Xerox Corporation in Puerto Rico, my philosophy shifted from the philosophy of my poor dad to the philosophy of my rich dad. The shift looked like this. 1. From a desire for security to a desire for freedom. 2. From a desire for a steady paycheck to the desire for great wealth. 3. From seeing value in dependence to seeing value in independence. 4. To make my own rules rather than obey someone else's rules. 5. A desire to give orders rather than take orders. 6. A willingness to be fully responsible rather than say, "It's not my job." 7. To determine the culture of a company rather than try to fit into someone else's company culture. 8. To make a difference in this world rather than complain about the problems of the world. 9. To know how to find a problem and turn it into a business opportunity. 10. To choose to be an entrepreneur rather than an employee. The new super entrepreneurs. In 1989, the world went through perhaps the biggest change in history. In 1989, the Berlin Wall came down and the internet went up. In 1989, the Cold War ended and globalization started to take off. The world went from walls to web, from division to integration. In his best-selling book The World is Flat for R. Strauss and Giroux, 2005, Thomas Friedman states that when the wall came down and the web went up, the world went to one superpower, the US global supermarkets and super individuals. Unfortunately, one such super individual is Osama bin Laden. Quoting Thomas Friedman, Osama bin Laden declared war on the United States in the late 1990s. After he organized the bombing of 2 American embassies in Africa, the U.S. Air Force retaliated with a cruise missile attack on his bases in Afghanistan as though he were another nation-state. Think of that. On one day in 1998, the United States fired 75 cruise missiles, at $1 million apiece, at a person. That was the first battle in history between a superpower and a super-empowered angry man. September 11th was just the second such battle. My prediction is there will soon be new super entrepreneurs whose wealth will dwarf the wealth of today's mega-rich entrepreneurs. In the 1980s, Bill Gates and Michael Dell were the hot young billionaire entrepreneurs. Today, the hot new billionaire entrepreneurs are Sergey Brin and Larry Page, founders of Google. My prediction is the next super entrepreneurs will not be from the United States. Why? Once again, the answer is that walls have turned into webs. In 1996, the Telecom Reform Act and money from Wall Street gave rise to such companies as Global Crossing, a bankrupt company that did one important task. It linked the world with fiber optics. Once this fiber optic network was in place, the brainpower from countries such as India did not need to emigrate to Silicon Valley to find work. The brainpower of India could now work from home, for much lower wages. Due to the power of fiber optic cables and the web, my prediction is the next Bill Gates or Sergey Brin will come from outside the United States, possibly from India, China, Singapore, Ireland, New Zealand, or Eastern Europe. Brainpower, innovation, technology, and access to the world's supermarkets will create the next teenage multibillionaire or trillion-dollar entrepreneur. Today many Americans are panicked at the idea that our high-paying jobs are being outsourced, shipped not only to India but all over the world. Today, even tasks performed by accountants, lawyers, stockbrokers, and travel agents can be performed somewhere else in the world for a lower price. No more high-paying jobs. So what does this do to the industrial age advice? Go to school so you can find a good secure job with high pay, or work hard and climb the corporate ladder. In my opinion, this old industrial age advice is toast. Many employees will have less work to find, much less, since the person competing for their job lives thousands of miles away. Most of us know that wages have not gone up for many workers. How can their wages go up when someone else is willing to work for so much less? One big difference between an entrepreneur and an employee is that an entrepreneur is excited about the changes the change from wall to web is bringing. Many employees are terrified of the changes. One last difference. The last difference I will mention is the difference in pay between employees and entrepreneurs. Looking at the list below of the highest paid and the lowest paid CEOs, you may notice that some of the most famous CEOs are the lowest paid. Could it be because CEOs who are employees work for a paycheck and CEOs who are entrepreneurs work for some other kind of pay? Highest paid. 1. John Wilder. 2. Robert Toll. 3. Ray Irani. 4. Bob Nardelli. TXU. Toll Brothers. $55.2 million. $44.3 million. Occidental Petroleum $41.7 million. Home Depot. 5. Edward Zander Motorola. $39.5 million. $38.9 million. Lowest paid. 1. Richard Kinder. 2. Steve Jobs. 3. Jeff Bezos. 4. Warren Buffett. 5. Paul Anderson. Kinder Morgan Energy. Apple Computer. Amazon. Berkshire Hathaway. Duke Energy. $1. $1. $81,840. $311,000. $365,296. Source: Fortune Magazine, May 2, 2005. The article includes salary, bonus, all stock grants, and other perks. Here I have included the first group, who appear to work primarily for salary, as employees, and the second group, who choose compensation in other forms, such as stock grants and other perks, as owners in the business. Are you an entrepreneur? As you can tell, there are differences between employees and entrepreneurs. The purpose of this book is to go deeper into those differences so you can decide, before you quit your job, if being an entrepreneur is the path for you. In conclusion, in my opinion, the biggest difference between an entrepreneur and an employee is found in the differences between the desire for security and the desire for freedom. My rich dad said, if you become a successful entrepreneur, you will come to know a freedom very few people will ever know. It is not simply a matter of having a lot of money or free time. It is the freedom from the fear of fear itself. Freedom from the fear of fear? I asked. Nodding, he continued, when you look under the covers of the word security, you find fear hiding there. This is the reason most people say, get a good education. It's not out of the love of study or scholarship, it is out of fear, the fear you won't get a good job, or be able to earn money. Look at how a teacher motivates students in school, it is motivation by fear. They say, if you don't study you will fail. So they motivate students to study by the fear of failing. When the student graduates and gets a job, once again the motivation is fear. Employers say verbally or nonverbally, if you don't do your job, you'll be fired. The employee works harder out of fear, the fear of not putting food on the table, the fear of not having money to make the mortgage payments. The reason people crave security is fear. The problem with security is that it does not cure fear. It simply throws a blanket over the fear, but the fear is always there, like the boogeyman chuckling under the bed. Being in high school at the time, I could really relate to the idea of studying out of fear. In school, I only study because I am afraid of failing. I do not study because I want to learn. I am so afraid of failing I study subjects I know I will never use. Nodding, Rich Dad said, studying for security is not the same as studying for your freedom. People who study for freedom study different subjects than people who study for security. Why don't they offer a choice of study in school? I asked. I don't know, said Rich Dad. The problem with studying for security is that the fear is always there, and if the fear is always there, then you rarely feel secure, so you buy more insurance and think of ways to protect yourself. You always quietly worry, even if you pretend you're successful and have nothing to worry about. The worst thing about living a life of security is that you often lead two lives, the life you live and the unlived life you know you could be living. Those are some of the problems with studying for security. The biggest problem of all is that the fear is still there. So becoming an entrepreneur means you will not have any fear? I asked. Of course not, smiled Rich Dad. Only fools believe they have no fear. Fear is always present. Anyone who says he or she doesn't have fear is out of touch with reality. What I said is, freedom from the fear of fear. In other words, you don't have to be afraid of fear, you don't have to be a prisoner of fear, fear will not define your world, as it does most people's worlds. Instead of fearing fear, you will learn to confront fear and use it to your advantage. Instead of quitting because your business is out of money, because you are afraid of not being able to pay your bills, being a true entrepreneur will give you the courage to go forward, to think clearly, to study, to read, to talk to new people, to come up with new ideas and new actions. The desire for freedom can give you the courage to operate for years without needing a secure job or a steady paycheck. That is the kind of freedom I am talking about. It is the freedom from the fear of fear. We all have fear, the difference is whether fear causes us to seek security or to seek freedom. An employee will seek security, an entrepreneur will seek freedom. So if security is the result of fear, what is the driving force behind freedom? I asked. Courage, smiled Rich Dad. The word courage comes from the French word, le cœur, the heart. He paused for a moment and then finished this conversation by saying, your answer for choosing to be an entrepreneur or an employee is found in your heart. Freedom is more important than life. One of my favorite movies of all times is the classic Easy Rider, starring Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper, and Jack Nicholson. In one of the scenes, just before Jack Nicholson is killed, he talks with Dennis Hopper about freedom. I believe it is appropriate to end this introduction with those lines, because it is why I chose to be an entrepreneur. I chose to be an entrepreneur to be free. For me, freedom is more important than life itself. In this scene, the three of them are camped in a swamp after being teased, threatened, and run out of town by a bunch of good old boys. Dennis Hopper, they're scared, man. Jack Nicholson, oh, they're not scared of you. They're scared of what you represent to them. DH, all we represent to them is somebody who needs a haircut. JN, oh no. What you represent to them is freedom. DH, what the hell is wrong with freedom, man? That's what it's all about. JN, oh yeah. That's right. That's what it's all about, all right. But talking about it and being it, that's two different things. I mean, it's real hard to be free when you're bought and sold in the marketplace. Of course, don't ever tell anybody that they're not free because they're going to get real busy killing and maiming to prove to you that they are. Oh yeah, they're going to talk to you and talk to you and talk to you about individual freedom. But when they see a free individual, it's going to scare them. DH, well, it don't make them running scared. JN, no, it makes them dangerous. Right after this scene, the three of them are ambushed and beaten by the same good old boys. Nicholson's character dies and Fonda and Hopper ride on, eventually to be killed, not by the same good old boys, but by other good old boys who share the same philosophy. While the movie has different messages for different people, for me the movie was about the courage it takes to be free, the freedom to be yourself, regardless of whether you are an entrepreneur or an employee. This rest of this book is dedicated to your freedom. oceanofpdf.com